Je suis ravie de vous présenter donc la première table ronde de cette deuxième journée et j'invite Émilie Darolles pour nous présenter son panel et toute cette table ronde magnifique. Je te laisse te présenter comme ça.
Merci beaucoup Karen. Bonjour à tous. Je pense que tous nos invités peuvent nous rejoindre. Donc Émilie Darolles, je suis la présidente de NielsenIQ pour West Europe. Et donc aujourd'hui, j'ai le plaisir de leader cette première table ronde qui sera en anglais. So we're going to switch to English now. This first round table will be in English today. And I have the pleasure to be joined by Paolo Bonsignore, who is the commercial director of Coop Italian Food. Etienne de Saint-Martin, who is the chief data officer at Auchan. And Bruno Delahaye, who is head of consumer practice at Cathay Innovation and ex-Walmart. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us today. The purpose of this roundtable is to talk about the importance of data and how we leverage data in our ability to drive customer loyalty and really optimize our in-store performance. So, from our NielsenIQ consumer index survey, we know that at present, consumers are very concerned given inflation, and that the last couple of years have really transformed the way consumers actually buy access products. And so we've seen that this retail environment is becoming increasingly challenging, and building customer loyalty is of critical importance. And what we know is that basket sizing are decreasing as frequency is also improving. So maybe a first question for you, Bruno, around the importance of building customer loyalty and gaining share of wallet.
Can you hear me? Perfect. All right. Nice to see you. All right. Thank you. In terms of customer loyalty and share of wallet, I guess there's a couple of points I want to raise there. First of all, as you mentioned, categories are impacted in different ways, right? So what we see is that food, for example, is probably a bit less impacted than non-food categories, right? And what we see is that essentially the increased frequency of shopping that you mentioned, because people are a little bit more careful, means also that we have a lot more opportunities to build a relationship with shoppers, right? So I think that as long as we try to gather the information, then we are actually in a very good spot to build a relationship with the customers, right? Have frequent interaction with them, right? And as long as we try to always add value when we are contacting them or when we are building these relations, then essentially, naturally, the loyalty will flow.
Yes, some thoughts about that. So I'm not the chief data officer of Auchan. I am the deputy. And Samir is sorry not to be here today, but I'm glad to be with you. Times in France are tough. I'm pretty sure you're aware of the inflation. We have a lot of constraint with brands, constraint with the government, with law, and with the price and inflation with our consumer. So as of today, the main ambition as a retailer is to make sure that we build a customer loyalty program that meet the expectations. And the expectations today are mainly on the price. And so the challenge for us is to make sure that we can create value for brands, create value for the consumer, but not destroying value in terms of pricing, because we are in very difficult times again, and a lot of constraint with the government.
So one of the maybe questions for you, Paolo. So we've seen post-COVID a greater fragmentation of the retail marketplace with e-commerce booming, the growth also of the hard discounters. Can you share some examples of how you leverage, data in the context of understanding the customers in the daily interactions. Like, what is the place of data in the daily running of the business operations?
Sure. Can you hear me? Or maybe I can also introduce what my company does, because maybe people don't know it. So Coop Italian Food is a consultancy and private label provider within Coop. Coop is #1 retailer in Italy, and we help retailers outside of Italy to create their own private label. Within this, we created a methodology to put together, of course, all the customer data, segmentations, all the things that need to be used. But lately, we came back to something that retailers probably are not very proficient in doing, and actually industrial brands are better than retailers in doing, which is to leverage emotions. And so we decided to use the archetype theory to blend in hard data. So basically, we designed private labels that put together, all the things that need to be done, but also that leverage the emotions in a much stronger way. And what we found out is that it's much more effective than just going through the segmentation and all this analysis, and then to offer something. Actually, customers, and we're all customers, react to emotions in a much stronger way. So there has to be a balance between all the analysis, all the segmentation, all the things you can do, and actually the final message, how all of this comes out.
Right.
And that's what we do.
Thanks, Paolo. I think also, Etienne, from a pricing standpoint.
Yes, we do have some use cases in production as today based on consumer data. I will share two of them. The main one is, I would say, the price elasticity model. How does it work? It works with, based on the consumer basket, what are the best product and what are the best price according to the geography, according to his history with Auchan, but also with lookalike with other consumer looking like him. So this will be the first one, and the objective is again to give back money to the consumer, to make sure that we guarantee margin for the company, but also with brand in terms of negotiation, but again to give back some money to the consumer. And the second one, which is kind of new in the retail industry, maybe, I don't know, at least for Auchan, is to build the product assortment not based on brand insight, not based on product insight, but mainly based on the consumer habit and consumer use of the product. What does it mean? That means that, again, we are based on the consumer basket, and then we do some kind of lookalike with product, and we gather them in new categories, which are not the product given by the brand, but again, by the consumer. The ability of this kind of model is to build new assortment. Why? Because Auchan, as you may know, is a very mass market economy with a lot of hypermarkets, etc., etc. And we want to propose, to expose new kind of assortments, more precise for a consumer in town or for a little shop.
So with the rise of e-commerce, so 12% of the total grocery sales in France actually e-com, goes up to 17% in the UK. We see obviously the digitization of the grocery business. And I'd like maybe Bruno to ask your perspective on the omni-channel strategies. So we talk a lot about omni-channel. How, what are some of the key challenges that you see in terms of implementing an omni-channel strategy and implications?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of communication around omni-channel, for sure. It's clearly the dream and the target. Now it's actually very, very difficult to implement, right? And I'm not aware of any companies that are actually truly having a true omni-channel strategy. What is happening is that we certainly have a multi-channel strategy at the moment, right? People are really working on the data themselves, trying to gather as many data and as many information to try to provide some kind of consistent experience for the customer, but it's extremely difficult, almost impossible. And an example of that is right now when you go to any brick and mortar retailer, when you walk in the store, most likely you are actually only identified at your end of the journey, right? You are only identified as a checkout. So if you are only identified as a checkout, then it's actually very, very difficult to provide a consistent customer journey because people realize who you are only when you are checking out, right? So that's one of the barrier or one of the main hurdle, I would say, right? The other one is that, as we all know, is in a store, everything is not digital, right? So as everything is not digital, you can't just flip a switch and say, okay, the assortment will be moved differently, you know, the banners will be different, right? You have essentially to standardize a little bit, right? So I think essentially, you know, short term, what we should all aim for is to have a consistent omni-channel approach when it's related to online, because most of the online experience can be consistent, even if some of them is anonymized, right? And try essentially to find ways to justify to consumer that they should share information, that they should identify themselves, right? And we have to find and create new ways for them to say, yes, I want you to know who I am because I know that if you know who I am, you will provide me with a better experience. And once we crack this approach, then we will be able to get one step closer to omnichannel.
Omnichannel?
Omnichannel for Auchan? It's a tough word for us. Why? Because we do have a lot of channels. We have Drive, we have e-commerce, we have stores, and in stores we have hypermarkets, we have supermarkets, we have Auchan Go, which are autonomous store. We have something like 15 channels to serve, and you can go in each channel or in all channels if you want. And the fact is, creating the consistency across all those channels is just a nightmare. Why? Because it's all about logistics. Logistics to guarantee that you will have the right assortment in the right channel. I would say it's the first point, and it's very tough to crack, to be very honest. And the second one is that sometimes product doesn't have the same value proposed depending on the channel. If you're buying on e-commerce, you want to be delivered very quickly. And if you want to go in an hypermarket, you want to have a large offer of product before choosing one. So it's very tough to build consistency on that. And I think everything is participating to build this omnichannel consistency years after years. But to be very honest, we are far from that at Auchan today.
At the beginning of the journey. Paolo, anything that you would like to...
My personal take is that, again, this is I second what they said, and I don't have much to add. I'm just, the more we work on our projects and the more we work with the retailers that we partner with, the more we understand the importance actually of there should be an insight at the center of the attention and then use the data to work around it. And of course, this is a context where we're talking about data, and I'm bringing here another point of view, which is that the insight has to be at the center and not and the data should support it. And what we're seeing is that you can get into a rabbit hole when you talk about data. You can, I'm in love with data. I lost endless hours, drilling down analysis and discovering things, et cetera, et cetera. But in the end, the leverage that makes a sale is psychological, is emotional. So what we're trying to do is to balance it out and see how data should support the rest. So.
Okay. On the thank you. On the customer data, right? The ability to segment actually clients and do like targeted marketing, and what's your view on the this notion of personalization, and how can it help also in the context of omnichannel, right? How do we actually really activate against this notion of personalization?
Yeah, I think segmentation is crucial. It's actually central to everything. My guess and my hope is that everyone has understood that by now. That actually providing understanding the customer profile, understanding what they want is crucial, and segmenting is really kind of the name of the game. As an example, at Walmart, when we built the retail media business, right, we actually build, probably in about 4 years' time, a $3 billion business, right? Just essentially leveraging customer segments, analyzing data, right, and essentially measuring, right? So that's, this is this type of impact that it has on retailers, right? And actually, we didn't build $1 billion business, we actually built 2, right? So one was 3, the other one was almost 1 billion when I left a few months ago. So it's that important. I would say that the thing we need to realize is that while essentially segmentation is crucial, it's actually very difficult to actually still implement, right? Because while you can analyze the data, you can create the relevant segments, right? Creating essentially an unlimited number of offers is actually very challenging, right? So you have essentially the analysis side, which is, let's say, straightforward or not that difficult, or some people have managed to do it, let's say, right? Deploying essentially this analysis to make really truly personalized offer is a lot more challenging, right? My hope and my expectation is that with Gen AI, the barrier will actually be lower, right? I mean, experiments are being made, as we all know, about leveraging this type of technology to create more personalized text, pictures, right, context, and essentially it's actually much easier today than it was a year ago, right? So we see that pretty much, the way it is moving is from, segmentation being very much around targeting, but still pushing the same type of offer. Now we are able to go further down the funnel, and we are more and more able to actually customize the approach, the message, the picture, so that we provide truly a customized experience there. And as we mentioned before, right, when you start going offline, so in-store, that's obviously still a lot harder. Right? And my last point there would be, we need to keep in mind that segments should not be static, right? Context is extremely important, right? So you need to take into account where the customer is in his journey, what he already has in his basket, what he is currently doing, right? And that should be part, essentially, of the way you are communicating with your customer as well.
And Bruno, in terms of by your experience in Europe and in the US with Walmart, can you share some of the best and worst practices that you've seen actually around customer segmentation?
Sure. So there are, I guess, different aspects. Overall, if we look at kind of a macro level, and maybe I'm oversimplistic, I'm usually oversimplistic, so that's okay. In the US, what we see is that making mistakes, doing errors is actually probably a lot more acceptable, right? So when you do this trial and error more systematically, right, that means that you are able to fine-tune a lot faster, right? And that's actually super important because you can tune the experience, right? Now, it shouldn't be done, talking about bad experience, this shouldn't be done without guardrail. And by guardrail, I mean you need to be really aware of ethic and having really clear approach in terms of ethic and what you are okay, comfortable doing, and in terms of governance as well, right? And what drives it at the end for me is, are you actually adding value to the end consumer, or are you destroying value? So I give you two concrete examples, right? Number one, I think everyone heard about it, but it's, we have to mention it anyway, right? There were a very famous retailer in the US a few years back, not Walmart, you'll find them online pretty easily. And what they did is that they analyzed data, identified that, in this specific household, there were essentially someone who was pregnant, right? They identified that from micro signal and low signal, right, of the type of purchase that were made, right? And starting essentially pushing offers to this household saying, hey, great news, so happy that you are pregnant, blah, 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 right? And that's how essentially the dad discovered that the teenage daughter was actually pregnant, right? So check it online, true story, right? And that's the type of thing where, at the end of the day, right? I mean, it was like a massive scandal, obviously. But that's where essentially you know that you have to be careful when you are experimenting, and you have to have clear ethic and governance approach, because otherwise you just go too far, right? So that's one very negative approach. One positive experience or something that I've seen as positive, and one thing that we've actually done together at, not personally, but in terms of companies, when I was at Walmart, was essentially evaluating the marketing pressure we put on consumers, right? So the obvious thing is that if you connect to a consumer, if you ask him, do you want to see more ads or less ads, right? Everyone is saying they want to have less ads, right? And then people generalize saying, well, retail media may be hurting the customer experience and all this type of stuff. So what we've done is that I conducted with my team a study where we created two websites, right? So two Walmart websites, identical, with one exception, right? We essentially remove all the ads from one website, right? And essentially we kept the current version of the website, right? And actually, to be complete, we created another version with actually more marketing pressure on it, which means more ads, right? And what you could see is that essentially 60 to 80% of people actually prefer the website with ads on it, right? So you are probably wondering, why would people prefer an experience with ads? Because essentially, imagine the nightmare otherwise, where essentially the website is not structured. You cannot really, there is no banner, there is no site content, there is no carousel. So all you see is essentially you are starting to get a list of products, and that's all you get, right? So you are you jump in on a website where you just have lists and lists of products and no indication whatsoever, right? And essentially what end customer did is that they look at the website and say, I don't like this one, right? And they look at the one with ads and they say, I like this one better. And what was actually interesting for our retail media business is that people were going one step further, because we tried another website with even more ads, and people say, I actually like this one better, right? So it's always about, trying to find the facts and trying to find when you actually add value. And I think, it's really important to understand is that it's not because you are targeting the customer, it's not because you are trying to activate them that you destroy value. You should always see how you can add value, right? Because if you add value, coming back to what you said initially, you then create this loyalty, right? And you create this flywheel, this virtuous circle.
Thanks a lot, Bruno. Thank you. Paolo, on the topic of customer segmentation, I think you had an example also to share.
Yes, we have an example. It was 2014, I believe. I used to work for a big coffee company. And we developed a customer lifetime value algorithm to predict the customers, and I'm talking about bars and restaurants and hotels, to predict their behavior and to predict when and why they would change coffee. You know, when you work in a coffee company, conquering one customer is really hard. It takes a year to get into the doors of an establishment. So it's a very interesting topic. So we developed this algorithm, and we divided all the customers in, you know, all the segmentations, possible segmentations, and then we discovered basically the company was going after the customers with the same value propositions. Of course, you give a certain coffee machine and certain prices to a small establishment and different conditions to a bigger one, but basically the company is the same, the product is the same, and the services are quite the same. And what we discovered was that customers were dropping us for different reasons, even though what we were offering was exactly the same. So they were using certain areas of our commercial and marketing offer depending on their needs. And we discovered that we were offering the wrong things to the wrong customers, basically. So we had to reshuffle completely our commercial proposition and our marketing proposition, and that led to a big increase in retention and ultimately in the EBIT, of course. And it's interesting to see that it can be applied to a very granular consumer when, you know, a single person gets into a store, or it could be applied to also big clients, because in this system we also had very big clients with hundreds of locations. So it works both ways.
Okay, thanks, Paolo. Next question. So promotional activity. Promotions are down in volume, 9% across West Europe. So question for you, Etienne, in the Auchan world, how do you leverage, you know, customer data actually to improve, you know, promo effectiveness and ROI?
Good question. It's more like, you know, we are at the beginning of a new journey regarding the promotion. Why? Because the fact is that when we think about technology, we are able to personalize every promotion, every product to every consumer. This is a fact. In terms of technology, we are ready. But we are in a world of constraint. Sorry. And what does it mean? That means that we are in a mass market environment, especially at Auchan. That means that we negotiate promotion once a year with brands, and we have a mass of promotion to distribute across the business, so across all consumer, and this will be the first constraint. The second one is the acceptability of a model of different pricing or different promotion to every consumer. The law in France is very clear that we don't have the right in the same store to sell the same product at two different prices. The third point is the acceptability by the consumer. What does it mean to sell one product in one environment to one price and then to change it without any reason except the segmentation to another people? So it's very, very tough in terms of business to create value and sense for the consumer, and you have to think about all the constraints we have in the business in terms of competitive environment and legal environment.
Yeah, and you're talking about the from push to pull model.
Yeah. And the fact is that we want to be on this journey. The journey is very interesting because we are pretty sure that spending the right promotion to the right consumer will be very, will have an ROI very interesting. So for sure, we want to be on board on this transformation. And today, in terms of tech, what does it mean at Auchan? That means that we are shifting from a world where we were pushing promotions. And you know, you receive an email with the promotion, an SMS, a text, etc., or the leaflet in your mail. And then more and more, what we want to install or to create is to pool the promotion. What does it mean? That means that you open your email, and then we calculate your segmentation, your score, and then we expose the right promotion or the right product. So it's this shift between push from the company, for example, retail, to the pool from the consumer. That is interesting, I think, to follow in the coming year.
Yep. Very good. Maybe a question for you, Bruno. In terms of leveraging customer data to maximize retail sales, but also the monetization element, is it something like you could, share with us, what are your views around maximizing data, customer data, and the aspect of monetization?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different aspects, obviously, right? My take, as always, I'm always pushing maybe the boundaries a little, but retailers have to find different ways to monetize their assets, right? We are seeing that we are essentially pretty much at a turning point right now where people have, or where retailers thought initially that the only thing they could monetize is essentially the products they are pushing, right? I think things are essentially changing now. My view is that we are actually turning the model almost upside down, right? Which means that now there is a monetization, right? But the monetization is more of the monetization of the data themselves than essentially monetizing what we are selling with a margin, right? There are actually businesses, the GAFAM, for example, right? Hundreds of billions of value every year is being created just by monetizing this data, right? When you think about it as a retailer, the value of the data you have access to is actually an order of magnitude better, more accurate, right, than these browsing behaviors that you may have on a browser or maybe on a social media, right? You actually have data about true behavior, about what people are doing, right? So this business about monetizing this browsing data is hundreds of billions, right? And retailers are actually sitting on this data, which are much more valuable, right? So my take there is that digital or traditional e-commerce company started to understand that several years ago, right? If we look at Amazon, right, the way they make money is mainly through data, right? And I'm not talking about the AWS side. I'm talking about the retail side. But that's how they make money. They understood it, right? Traditional brick and mortar businesses haven't understood it yet, or not fully, right? And they are, at least in the US, they are starting to embrace it, right? They are starting to embrace the monetization of this data, which means essentially building this partnership with the brands, right? And essentially sharing the value slightly differently and telling the brand, hey, I can help you, right, with some meaningful targeting, right, to add value to the customer, right? And in exchange, I will take a small share of the added value I'm creating, right? So that's really happening, right? I mentioned before the business of retail media for Walmart is $3 billion in 4 years, right? Built pretty much from scratch, right? You can imagine that the Amazon business is $30 billion in the US alone, just for this part, right? So you can imagine that $3 billion is just a step. It's growing really fast. It's probably around 10% of the bottom line of Walmart already, right? You can imagine that in 5 years or 10 years from now, it will be maybe most of the bottom line, right? So that means the full value proposition of retailers are actually changing. This model is turning, and I think it's super, super important that all of us become aware of it, right? And become aware of how impactful this will be. Because it's not just, you know, a little thing. It's actually a full transformation of the retail ecosystem.
Thanks a lot, Bruno. Yes.
I will just add something regarding Auchan situation, according to what you say, Bruno, is that we do have better data than GAFAM regarding the Auchan environment, but the Auchan environment is very close and little when we compare it to the GAFAM one. And what we did at Auchan, but not only Auchan, with the full ecosystem in the AFM, Association Familiale Mullier, you know, Leclerc, Decathlon, Auchan, etc., is that we created an alliance between all the major companies to make sure that we can gather this kind of information regarding the customer, to then have a complete view of the habit of the consumer in terms of sports, house with Leroy Merlin, food with Auchan, etc. And we strongly believe that we will multiplicate the revenue of this retail media by 10 in the 5 next year.
Right.
Example.
Yeah, yes. And maybe to bring this discussion right to closure, some advice based on your experience, what you've seen in the US, any advice that you have for the audience in terms of going after the retail media opportunities, and I think something that you can share in terms of the steps, and because you've been bold, right? Based on what you've been able to manage with Walmart from 500 million to 3 billion in a space of 2-3 years.
Yeah,
I think that would be really valuable.
Okay, I'm not sure I can share really advice there, but what I observe and what I see is that the culture in the US obviously is very, very different, right? When we see it from, let's say, from France, and essentially I left Walmart 4 or 5 months ago. What we see for France is that we tend to kind of underestimate the knowledge and the capabilities that we have, right? And therefore, what we do is that we tend to be shy, right? We tend to shy away and not realize kind of the full potential, right? And, I have discussions where people are telling me, my measure is just not good enough. My targeting is not good enough. This thing is not good enough, and I could do actually a lot better, right? I can tell you that, when I joined Walmart, and still to some extent today, right, the data was nowhere, right? The measurement was, really bad. I would argue that it's probably not great yet, right? But essentially what we did is that we went for it, we chatted and aligned with brands, right? And we say, okay, that's a journey. We are going to build this journey. We are going to work at it together, right? We don't have all the answers. We don't have all the solutions, for sure. We know what we have is, average at best, right? But let's build this journey because we know that today, already what we can do is adding a lot of value to the customer, right? Adding lots of value to the brand, and that would add also lots of value to Walmart. So we just went for it, right? With kind of a pretty humble approach and say, let's work together. Let's set essentially goals, right? Let's set steps and agree that, okay, our measurement is not going to be great. Maybe we don't, whatever for the specialists, maybe we don't even do fair share to start with. Maybe we don't attribute sales correctly, right? Maybe our targeting is pretty basic to start with. But what we know is that even with this average approach, we are probably a lot better than essentially targeting with, saying, oh, based on your browsing behavior, I think you are probably a male or a female, so I'm going to push you this type of product, right? Already we are starting from our starting point is actually our lowest starting point is actually probably a lot higher than what others have, right? So start from that, be transparent about the fact that essentially you don't have all the answer. that it's a journey, right? And that you want to build it together. But essentially, if you do that, right, I think you will embark a lot of brands, right? You will add value to the overall ecosystem, right? And ultimately, you can build truly a multi-billion-dollar business.
Great. Thank you very much. So big thanks to our panelists today, Etienne, Paolo, and Bruno. And just maybe for those who are interested, you do have the NielsenIQ lab actually available at the booth E63, where any questions on inflation, promotion, or assortment can be addressed within 48 hours. So don't hesitate. Any questions that you may have, we're here to help. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.